The next point of education to review is transition take fouls, which was a new rule that was implemented just last season. Here, the defensive player, Javon Carter, is getting up off the floor when he commits a defensive foul from a position where he would be unable to make a legitimate defensive play. This foul by Carter, committed against the dribbler, Chris Boucher, was correctly ruled a transition take foul. Let's look at another example of a transition take foul. The defensive player here, Nikola Vucevic, fouls his opponent, Marvin Bagley III, immediately after the change of possession, but before Bagley has the opportunity to advance the ball. Per the rule, this was correctly deemed to be a transition take foul, and the penalty of one free throw plus possession was given. Now let's look at some examples of defensive fouls that would not be ruled a transition take foul. Here, the defensive player, Andrew Wiggins, makes a legitimate attempt to steal the ball from the offensive player, LeBron James, and in doing so, he makes illegal contact, and the defensive foul is correctly called. We can see that Wiggins has not given up on the play, and he did make a legitimate attempt to play defense, so this was correctly ruled a common foul and not a transition take foul. This next example will show another defensive foul that would not be ruled a transition take foul. The dribbler, Mike Conley, does not push the pace, and thus the transition scoring opportunity is deemed to have ended. And even though Conley then passes to Karl Anthony Towns, and Towns accelerates before he is fouled by the defensive player, Anthony Davis, this was ruled a common foul because the foul occurred after the transition scoring opportunity had ended. Now let's look at some examples related to our bench conduct guidelines. Here, the highlighted player, Jared Vanderbilt, stands up in front of the Los Angeles bench and he attempts to overtly distract the opposing player, Damian Jones, who is attempting a three-point field goal. These actions by Vanderbilt clearly exceed the guidelines, and the unsportsmanlike technical foul was correctly called here. Another area of the bench conduct guidelines involves coaches attempting to distract their opponents during live play. Here, we see an assistant coach on the New York team bench stand up and attempt to overtly distract the opposing player, Isaac Okoro, who is attempting a free throw. These actions clearly exceed the guidelines, and the unsportsmanlike technical foul was correctly assessed. Another aspect of the bench conduct guidelines include bench players and/or assistant coaches standing in front of their bench for extended periods of time. Here, we will see two examples of teams committing this type of violation. The officials will first issue a warning for this type of prolonged standing. If the bench standing occurs again, a delay of game warning will be assessed, and if it occurs yet again, a second delay of game would be assessed, which would result in a technical foul. In contrast to the previous examples, these next clips show teams spontaneously standing to celebrate a play on the floor. These are legal reactions, and no penalties would be assessed on the examples shown here. Again, to be clear, bench players and assistant coaches may legally stand up to spontaneously celebrate a play on the floor, but they must then sit back down on the bench in a reasonable amount of time. Respect for the game remains a point of education for this season. Here, we will see an example of a reaction that exceeds the respect for the game guidelines. The highlighted player, Marcus Morris Sr., commits an overt gesture in resentment to the foul call by clapping repeatedly at the official. This type of overt gesture will be met with a technical foul as it exceeds the respect for the game guidelines. Another example of actions that exceed the respect for the game guidelines can be seen here. The highlighted player, R.J. Barrett, throws the ball forcefully against the basket support. Players are not allowed to forcefully throw or kick the ball against the basket support for any reason. Any violation of this rule will result in a technical foul. This final play in this section will show a reaction that does not exceed the respect for the game guidelines. Following the defensive foul, the highlighted player, Nikola Jokic, reacts briefly to the call, but his reaction is not overt and it dissolves almost immediately. As we know, players are allowed to react to calls with which they disagree, provided the reaction is not disrespectful or prolonged. Jokic's reaction here is a legal, heat-of-the-moment reaction, and no technical foul was needed nor given. We will conclude the video with several examples of positive interactions between players and officials. The players and the officials shown here communicate with each other in a calm and professional manner, and they maintain their composure throughout the interaction. As we start the 2023 and 24 season, it is our continuing goal that our players and our officials continue to demonstrate mutual respect toward each other on a nightly basis.